polls are now closed. We have the latest results from local elections. We take a closer look at some of the local candidates who are vying for this election season. And joining us in the studio to discuss all of today's election news is adjunct instructor Bill Enright of the Political Science Department. All that and much more on this special edition of Courier TV News. Hi, and thanks for joining us. I'm Anna Pierczynski. Welcome to Courier TV News Primary Election Coverage 2018. At the top of the ticket this year is the Illinois governor's race. CNTV reporter Nick Petrillo brings us up to speed on both of today's primaries for governor.
Helping create jobs in Illinois. Cut the red tape.
After 4 rocky years as governor, Bruce Rauner has drawn several Democratic opponents for the November election, but first he has to make it through the Republican primary. Rauner is being challenged by State Representative Jeannie Ives of Wheaton, who is accusing him of selling out Republicans after signing bills supporting abortion and protection for non-felon illegal immigrants. Rauner has criticized Ives' campaign as being supported by liberals who think she would be an easier opponent in the general election. Ives is trailing Rauner in the polls by several points, but low turnout could allow her to score an upset victory. Leading the polls in the Democratic primary is businessman J.B. Pritzker, who is self-funding his campaign using his multi-billion-dollar fortune. Pritzker emphasized opposition to Rauner and President Trump in his campaign, as well as his longtime history as a community organizer.
I started knocking on doors when I was 11 years old with my mother, and have been doing it ever since, so that's 40 years. There is nothing like knocking on a door, talking to somebody and convincing them, and then doing the ±0 so that they'll get out to vote on Election Day.
Also running is businessman Chris Kennedy. If elected, Chris, the son of Robert Kennedy, would be the first member of the Kennedy family to serve as the state's governor.
Everybody wants an America that was like the one for the Kennedys, where they could arrive here as an immigrant family and rise from rags to riches, where we're the country of unlimited freedom. If we don't return that, if we don't restore that, the anger and the rage in this country will continue.
Polling about even with Kennedy is State Senator Daniel Biss. Biss is running a grassroots campaign emphasizing his middle-class background, progressive values, and government reform.
So we have our own little Trump here in Illinois, and what we need to do is to use this movement that's brewing across the state as the tools on the way to defeating Trump in 2020 to defeat Rauner in 2018. And the way to do that is to lay out a strong, positive, bold, progressive economic message that will lift people up everywhere in the state and will enable us to afford that by taxing the richest Illinois residents who have been the beneficiaries of 2 generations of economic growth and have not paid their share. And then around that agenda, we build a grassroots army to win elections and to carry that message.
Although Rauner and Pritzker are likely to win their primaries, it's still a close enough race in both contests to make it anyone's game. Reporting for Courier TV, this is Nick Petrillo.
Joining us now in the studio is adjunct instructor Bill Enright of the Political Science Department with some analysis. Hi, Bill.
Hey, Anna, how are you?
Oh, I'm great. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Thanks for joining us.
You bet.
So we just saw that there are 2 highly competitive governor races this evening. So what can you tell us about these races?
Yeah, on the Republican side, we've got an upstart candidacy from Jeannie Ives against our incumbent Bruce Rauner. And the fun thing for us is that Jeannie Ives is from DuPage County, from over in Wheaton, and so she's been certainly ruffling a lot of feathers in the Republican Party. An interesting side note also is that the lieutenant governor, Evelyn Sanguinetti, is also from Wheaton, and they know each other pretty well, so that's kind of an interesting side as far as the Republican Party goes. And then in the Democrat side, we know that we've got 2 very wealthy families who are also running against an upstart grassroots candidate with Kennedy and Pritzker, well-known families against Biss, who's really a grassroots type of candidate.
So you mentioned our very own Wheaton resident, Jeannie Ives. Do you think that her kind of more controversial takes on issues is helping her in this race, or is it kind of hurting her?
Well, I think for sure it's done a lot to help get her name recognition out there, because otherwise maybe a lot of people hadn't heard of her, and so that controversial commercial that she ran probably helped at least get her name recognition out there, which is awfully big in politics. And then on top of the name recognition, she's also going after that more conservative base, which really does get out to vote in a primary, and so that might really help her in the end.
So do you think there is a chance that she could beat Rauner?
There's always a chance. Rauner spent a lot of money to try to make sure that she doesn't beat him, but there's always a chance. We've seen it in many elections in the past.
So going more on the Democratic side, is there really a front runner in these races yet, or is it anybody's game?
Yeah, I haven't seen a poll that really shows much of a front runner. Certainly, since J.B. Pritzker spent a lot of money, it might really be helping him on that side. And he's been working downstate more, and so that maybe is going to pick up a few extra votes for him. But of course, most of the votes in the Democratic side really come out of Cook County.
So do you think that the fact that these two of the runners for the Democratic Party come from kind of more wealthy families, whereas the other one is kind of, he's a startup, he does this on his own. Do you think that's going to help him and people are going to relate a little bit more to him?
Yeah, I'm not sure. He's also at least been able to run a lot of commercials because he's been able to raise enough money through grassroots efforts. But I'm not exactly sure if that's going to turn the corner for him or not. And then, of course, we've got the Kennedy name, which is so well known in politics throughout the country, let alone here in Chicago. And his father, Robert Kennedy, former Attorney General, presidential candidate who was assassinated, that certainly is probably going to play into it in some ways.
Thank you so much for that analysis.
You bet.
So after Hillary Clinton carried Illinois' 6th congressional district in the 2016 election, Peter Roskam became an instant target for Democrats. CNTV reporter Manny Lopez went to a candidate forum to learn about the 7 Democrats vying to be the one to take on Roskam in November.
Now, I am honored to introduce the hardworking men and women who want to represent the Democratic Party in the 6th Congressional District General Election on November 6th.
I'm here at Barrington High School today for the Democratic Candidates Forum for the 6th Congressional District. Today, 7 candidates are facing off to see who's going to go ahead and run in November.
Whoever you think is the right candidate, I urge you to vote for that person next week. Vote for the person who best shares your worldview, who best identifies the problems that you see with the country, the person you think will fight for the things that you would fight for.
Tonight, candidates are facing off to see who will challenge Representative Peter Roskam in November. The 6th District is also expected to be competitive after Hillary Clinton carried it in the 2016 presidential election, even though Roskam easily won his own race.
The one issue that didn't come up tonight that I'm really passionate about is student loan reform. I personally have $100,000 in student loan debt, so it's an issue that I really care a lot about, and it's something that it's not only bad for those of us who are saddled with this loan debt, that we're not able to start our lives or start our careers because we've just got so much of this loan debt, but it's going to be a problem for everybody because the loan debt burden on the economy right now is higher than the mortgage loan debt burden was at the height of the financial crisis. So if we don't make some big changes on our loan debt pretty quickly, we're going to have an even bigger financial collapse than we had 10 years ago.
Yeah, Ryan Huffman stood out to me as he showed to me his professionalship, and also he came from a journalist. He was a journalist, and he's saddled with student debt, so he knows how other people feel, how millennials feel when it comes to getting a good steady job and having to pay off those debts. And I can relate to what he does, and he has that ideology that can push America forward into a better future with the bills he's going to try and introduce into Congress, and hoping to make our future better for everybody else, especially in generations to come.
It's important that everybody get out and vote, especially everyone who's in a minority group, because they're trying to take your rights away.
The most important thing is for people to get out and vote.
Get out and vote.
Bill, on the Democratic side, we have 7 people running for the 6th Congressional District. So who do you think will come out on top on this ballot in November?
Well, Amanda Howland was the one who ran against Roskam last time, and so she's got some name recognition, so I would assume that she would certainly be up there. And then Kasten has started to move ahead a little bit also because he's had enough money to run some commercials, and when you have enough money to run commercials, a lot of name recognition comes with it.
So the fact that there are 7 people running for this seat, do you think that kind of makes it more of a challenge for there to really be a front runner?
Yeah, of course, when there's 7 people, you've got to really try to differentiate yourself. And so that's going to be difficult. And oftentimes it's money that's going to help you differentiate yourself because you can do mailers, you can put up posters, you can put up billboards, you can run commercials, and those are the things that are going to get your name out there.
So with this district, there is the controversy about the gerrymandering with the Republican kind of taking over the votes for this. So do you think that Democrats even have a chance of winning this seat?
Yeah, well, it is an interesting district because it was actually the Democrats in the legislature that created this district so that they could put as many Republicans in that district as they could to give Democrats a chance in the other districts. And so with this one, it's going to be very difficult for a Democrat to win just because there's been so many Republicans put in here. But at the same time, there's been a lot of people upset with the way that Roskam's voted in the last couple of votes in the Congress, and so maybe there's enough people upset that they could have a chance at it. And certainly when you have 7 people running, they must think that there's somewhat of a chance to take that seat over.
So in this race, there are 5 women running against 2 men. So why do you think that more women are trying to start getting into politics, especially on a local level?
Yeah, well, I think the Me Too movement's the thing that's really started organizing women, getting people involved with running, and really, if you want to have a say in politics, then you've got to run in politics. Oftentimes, you have to start at some lower level seats, not usually a congressional level seat, lower level seats, maybe a state house seat, maybe even a school board seat, maybe even a state senate seat, and then start working your way up. But it's fantastic to see all of these women involved, and there's women across the board that have been running in these races.
Thank you so much for your take on this.
You're welcome.
Sheriff John Zaruba is retiring after 21 years as DuPage County Sheriff. Now, 2 officers in the Sheriff's Department are duking it out in an intense primary to be the Republican candidate to succeed him in November.
For the first time in 20 years, DuPage County gets to vote for a new sheriff as current Sheriff John Zaruba retires. 2 Republican candidates, James Mendrick and Frank Bibiano, are fighting for their seat in this upcoming primary election.
Well, obviously, they're big shoes to fill. Sheriff John Zaruba is a visionary in law enforcement. He's very well respected, and he has brought the DuPage County Sheriff's Office that same respect. The people of DuPage County have rested well under his watch, and I certainly intend on filling those shoes to that capacity, yes.
These Republican candidates are well known within the DuPage County District. Both have worked in the Sheriff's Office enforcing the law to help make the community a better place.
I have better experience. I've been in the trenches. I'm the only candidate that's actually been a commander of patrol and knows the brick and mortar of the operation. And again, I emphasize that to be entwined with budget knowledge. Budget knowledge is paramount. With the fiscal times that we're going through right now, if you don't have a manage on that budget, we're going to have real problems.
Well, one of the biggest things that I'm focused on is implementing a more comprehensive active shooter training program for the deputies that work for the office. Another big area that I'm concerned with are the senior population as well as the special needs population of the county. They need some special services, and I'm certainly, it's a big area of concern of mine.
Each candidate shares their platform on why they should have your vote for sheriff.
I believe that my time in internal affairs, I did a lot of internal investigations and public corruption cases, and I think that I will bring a strong ethical background to the office of sheriff.
Communication is the key to everything. You know, we can't solve our problems without being good communicators, working with local government, working with the county board, working with the citizens, the other deputies. You know, everything is about how you talk to people. Everything in life and every problem solved is going to be revolved around how we maintain our relationships.
This is a very important race. The sheriff does a lot of things in the county, is responsible for a lot of, he or she has a lot of responsibilities relative to law enforcement within the county. So it's a big decision by the voters to vote in a new sheriff.
Bill, can you give us a little background on the endorsing of these 2 candidates by Sheriff John Zaruba?
Well, it's a little bit unusual for there to be an endorsement from one Republican to another Republican in the primary anyway, because oftentimes they don't endorse anyone. And with this, it's also a little bit interesting because they're both working in the Sheriff's Department, and I had heard that there was an endorsement coming from Mendrick first, and then it was switched over to Bibiano, and I'm not sure why, but I bet it has something to do with politics.
So is there any front-runner for this race?
I don't think so. I think this one's going to be a close one, and so I think we're going to be up all night watching to see what happens with this race.
So a position that Mendrick has taken that seems to really be at the forefront of this race is that he wants to repair the relationships between the Sheriff's Department and the county board. do you think that's like a good thing to be focusing on?
Well, of course, it's always good to have a good relationship with the county board. Of course, at the same time, the sheriff's department's always looking for something out of the county board, and the county board maybe is trying to say, well, we can't spend all of that money. And so you never know like which one's going to win out. And I know that Mendrick is also very in favor of trying to do something with technology, and of course, oftentimes technology may cost a little bit of extra money, and they're going to have to go to the county board for the funding.
Do you think that Zaruba's endorsement of Bibiano is kind of going to push him a little bit ahead of Mendrick in the race?
Yeah, I'm not so sure if everybody looks at the endorsement, but it certainly wouldn't hurt. And Zaruba's a well-known person in DuPage County, sheriff for many years, in the sheriff's department for over 30 years, and so I wouldn't be surprised if it does help in some way.
Okay, great, thank you. Primary ballots don't usually see too many referendums, but Community High School District 99 is seeking approval for a $136.6 million bond measure to fund significant improvements at both Downers Grove North and South High Schools. We talked to Daily Herald reporter James Fuller about this proposal.
So the Downers Grove school referendum, it's one of the most high-profile questions on this ballot. It definitely has the highest dollar figure. Number for folks showing up to vote on Tuesday. The question that they're seeking, it's in excess of $130 million to do a variety of school improvements. And the thinking behind that right now, the selling point at least, is that the high schools in the district aren't equal. So they're looking to, the district administration is looking to fund improvements that would provide better balance and equality between the schools. And some of the things that they're looking at are building a new gym. They're looking to provide air conditioning to every classroom in the district for the first time. They're looking to do things like upgrade science labs and a culinary lab and add learning commons. So that's kind of the basis, the thinking behind why they're pushing for this large dollar figure at this time. There's a second question is that, why this much? So they had an option to ask voters for a much smaller dollar figure. There were plans to go to the voters to ask for money that was along the lines of a little more than $80 million. What's behind that decision is the district did a fair amount of polling leading into this referendum, where they provided a couple scenarios to local taxpayers about what they wanted to do. And the district administration says the results of those polls overwhelmingly show that even when they tell voters that this is going to increase their property taxes, they're still, yes, ask us this question, we're in favor of you guys moving forward. Now, whether or not that actually pans out, Tuesday for the vote, we'll have to see. Typically tax increases don't fare very well, but lately we've been seeing a little bit more wiggle room for school districts seeking things like this.
Bill, we are watching this referendum closely tonight. Can you give us your take on it?
Well, first, it's kind of interesting because it's a referendum at a primary, and a referendum where the primary looks like it's going to have a pretty large voter turnout. And when you have a large voter turnout, it can be difficult to get a referendum passed because the voters walk into the polling place, they see that referendum for the first time, see that it's $133 million, which they have to vote to increase their taxes to pay for, and oftentimes they take a look and say, I don't know what that is, no. And so it can be difficult to get a referendum passed in an environment like this.
So what's the school's next step if it doesn't get passed tonight?
Yeah, if it doesn't get passed, they'll wait for the next election cycle and try to get it in there. And normally they would wait for a local election cycle, so one that would happen in April, not April this year, but April 2019. And then it's much lower voter turnout, and oftentimes that's when you're going to see a referendum pass for like school funding.
Okay, great, thank you. So the results have not come in yet for these races, but can we look at some of the candidates and see who you think might be taking home a victory tonight?
Sure thing, yeah.
So for governor, we have the Democratic side. We have Pritzker, Kennedy, and Biss. And then for the Republican side, we have Rauner and Jeannie Ives. So who do you think is kind of going to come out on top here?
On the Republican side, I think that Rauner, using all of the money that he has, is probably going to come out on top. And even some of the voters who I've spoken to have said, well, I wouldn't vote for Jeannie Ives because she's too aligned with Mike Madigan, which really I'd be surprised if is true, but that's the perception that they have. So I think that Rauner is probably going to come out on top with that. On the Democrat side, I would say that it's still a toss-up. If I were going to pick somebody, I'd probably pick Kennedy, but I wouldn't say, I wouldn't bet my house on it.
So when it comes to the sheriff races, do you think Bibiano is going to take this home?
Yeah, another toss-up, and I know that they've both been out working hard. I've run into both of them out on the streets, at the train stations, and so I know they've both been working hard, and I wouldn't want to bet my house on it. If I had to choose one, I would choose Mendrick.
So for the 6th congressional district seat, who do you think out of those 7 people will be the one?
Yeah, since Kasten's been able to run commercials and has a little bit more name recognition out there, I would probably choose him. But again, one of those things it's hard to call.
And finally, do you think that the referendum will get passed?
It's going to have a tough time. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't go through. It's hard in these primaries where a lot of people come out to vote and aren't familiar with the issues and decide to vote no.
Any kind of final takes on anything that maybe we didn't get to talk to or didn't go in length about?
Well, I'm following the 42nd legislative district of the state of Illinois because that one's going to be interesting. We've got it's Jeannie Ives' former seat, and we've got 3 people vying for it in the Republican side. And there's been some controversy over there. One of the candidates allegedly used racial slurs, and so that's been reported in the newspapers. And I'm looking forward to see what happens with that. And then there's several county board races that are going on, particularly one right here in District 4, where there's 5 candidates, maybe 6 candidates running for the Republican side, and then they choose 2 out of those who will run in the as Republicans in the general election in November.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and as always, thank you for your insight in these very interesting topics.
You're welcome.
This has been your election update. Thank you for choosing Courier TV News for your election coverage this evening. We will be back at 10 p.m. with more updates, including candidates' reactions and analysis. We will have live reactions to local elections on our Facebook page at Courier TV. We leave you now with a segment we call Chap Chat. We asked COD students if they voted today, and if not, why.
No, I did not vote today because I know nothing about local politics. There's nowhere to read about it, or at least that I know of, so I don't know.
I didn't vote yet. I'm going to vote soon.
No.
Why not?
I didn't want to vote today.